Hi, I'm Barry Grant. I'm an addiction counselor with Extern Problem Gambling, and welcome to the Problem Gambling podcast. My co-host is Claire Dunnigan, an expert by lived experience. I'm a recovery coach and project lead on the Empower Her Recovery Network Women's Service here within Extern. And our guest today is Owen. Oh my God, your surname has just gone straight out of my head. I'm having a senior
It's
moment.
Owen Collins is the
Collins,
full
I
name.
knew
Yeah.
that. I just had a brain fart. We'll leave that in just to show
Yeah,
how human and flawed I am. Owen
yeah.
Collins, some of you may know him as the recovering gambler on TikTok, where he puts up lots of really cool content for people in recovery. And I know from loads of the clients that I've worked with over the years, they would actually bring up, they'd mention your account and that they follow you and they got a lot of
Yeah.
really good information and ideas and just helpful bits and pieces from following your account on TikTok. So it's great to know that because when you're
That's
putting
nice to
stuff
hear.
out there, yeah, it is because like
Yeah.
it's like the podcast. You gotta put stuff out there and you hope maybe somebody gets something useful out of it at some point. But
Yeah.
a lot of the time you never hear from those people. So they're out there. They're out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So, thanks so much for joining us today. You're down in Cork, aren't you? Are you?
I am, yeah, I'm Cork, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to just start off by telling us a little bit about how you got into gambling in the first place?
Yeah, so I suppose I've told the story a few times now, but basically I was in secondary school. I was in fourth year at the time, and a couple of my friends had already kind of been introduced to gambling in the bookies. It was actually Boyle Sports was the favorite back then. So it was just a case of one day, on lunch break, it was like, "Oh, do you want to come down with us?" And I didn't know at the time that it would turn out to be the wrong reason, but yeah, I went down on my lunch break, and that was kind of progressed fairly quick from there. That was my first bet. I didn't win my first bet, which is something you always a lot of people will always say, "Oh, it was the first bet." Drew me in. It was for me. It was just the adrenaline rush is what caught me straight away. So it was yeah, it was from the age of 16 was when I first started gambling.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a common enough story. And would it be, are you one of these people who's gone into a betting shop in your school uniform and being
Oh, yeah,
served?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, back then it was like they would have been strict enough, you know what I mean? But if you put a jacket over your school jumper, like you're getting served. Like there was no issues back then, no. So yeah, we just cover up the uniform and stroll in, and that was your lunch break then.
Yeah. So your first bet wasn't the winner. That's, I suppose, unusual for a lot of people who kind of
No,
develop habits.
it actually took a good few bets to get my first winner. But it was I got close enough, and it was just exciting, and it kind of gave me something. I didn't really focus too much in school either, so it was kind of something to look forward to on your break. You fly down to the bookies and stuff like that. But it took about maybe it was my sixth, maybe seventh bet before I won. And again, it wasn't a big win or anything like that, but it definitely straight away after my first bet, I could feel that I liked it. You know what I mean? So it kind of kept drawing me back. Yeah.
Mm. And what sort of stuff were you backing?
Soccer, football was the only thing I ever really, even throughout my whole, we'll say, gambling career, it was always football. I might have backed maybe two or three horses down through the years, but it was football. I kind of convinced myself I knew enough about football that it would give me an edge and so on like that, but we all know how that ends up, really.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah.
So you starting out around 16 and okay, you'll have your few losing bets at the start and then you got some sort of a winner along the way. Did you get a big, and when I say big win, I'm not talking about it doesn't have to be a massive amount of money now, but a
Yeah.
significant, a win that kind of
Ye-
stuck in your mind or that had an impact on you.
there's always one that it was from back then. It's the only one that would kind of really, well, there was one other, but the first kind of one that was like, wow, this is amazing was, it was Champions League night final, and Arsenal were playing Barcelona. And I went in, I put on a few different €10 bets, and it was a multi bet. So, like, I needed a few different things to happen. And basically, the one I actually backed was for Arsenal to be winning at halftime and Barcelona to win the game, which actually that's how it ended up. It ended up being 1-0 at halftime and then 2-1 to Barcelona. And I won €230 at the time off €10. And yeah, I was buzzing after that. That one has always kind of stuck with me. There's a few there, but that was the first kind of at that age. That was the first one that really stuck with me. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's brings up a couple of things there. I mean, obviously, like the big win doesn't have to be life-changing amounts of money, right? It can
Yeah.
be that's it's still a lot of free
Well,
money
it
and
was at the time. It was like it was equal to like I was working part time. You know what I mean? Kind of picking up a few hours in the local super value and stuff. So at the time, it was like the equivalent of nearly 3 weeks' wages. So for me, it was like, wow, this is easy. You know what I mean? Oh, I just have to do that a few more times now, and then I don't have to work. Which didn't. It wasn't the case.
yeah. Except I'll put on more next time because
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
thinking,
that's all. That's always the thing. The next thought was, why didn't I put €50 on it?
oh
Or
yeah,
it's like you're always thinking, oh, if I put on 50 now, it would have been so much different. And but yeah, it's yeah. That was the one that always kind of stuck for me from back then.
yeah. And the other interesting thing about that is those markets that are available in football now. Like, I mean, coming up on 53. Listeners, regular listeners may know gambling was never my thing.
Yeah.
Personally, I had my own issues with other things,
Okay.
but gambling, I was never interested in gambling. So, like, since I started in this work, I have gambled just to learn more about gambling.
Yes.
But
Yes. Yeah.
as a young person, I was often stoned and drinking way too
Yeah.
much,
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
stuff like that. So, gambling just never ever appealed to me. But a few years ago, during one of the recent World Cups, I remember walking into a Ladbrokes in Dublin. We were up visiting friends, and I was going to watch the Sweden England game. My wife's from Sweden. And I
Oh,
walked
okay.
into Ladbrokes, and they had these betting terminals, which is useful for me because I would not know how to write out stock.
Yes. 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 Yeah.
And there's a lot of people like that at this stage. So the betting terminals are a good way of getting younger people in the door.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
sit at the betting terminal, I go, okay, gonna watch Sweden England. I'll pick out some bet in this match. And I've gone through all the different markets and I'm going, Jesus Christ, there's so many markets
Yeah.
in this match. But the one that I picked, because I was only going to put on a small bet and I wanted some bang for my buck, was England to be winning at halftime, but Sweden to win the match. Now, that is not what happened.
Yes. 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 Yes.
But that was like 40 to 1. So I was like, great, I'll stick on my five or whatever it was and I'll
Yeah. Yeah.
see what happens. But there must have been 50 markets in this game
Yeah.
of
It's
football.
it's
And
crazy. Yeah.
when I was 16, you could bet, win, lose, draw. Do you know what I mean? They
Yes.
were the football markets. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This thing has evolved so much that it's become much more like a slot machine where, okay, well, I've bet on first goal scorer, but Haaland didn't score first, somebody else did. So
Yeah.
now, but there's 87 minutes left in the game. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's 40 other markets that I can bet on. So it's bang, 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 bang. More
Yeah.
bets. Claire, you know a hell of a lot more about sports betting than I ever will. Any thoughts on Owen's story so far?
My thoughts are, as sad as it is to say, oh, and I spent a lot of my 20s in the bookies from morning to night, but
Yeah.
football bets were not part of what I would do. And I actually think about that now and how that's how you started, because for me it was like horse racing bets, which were pretty much every 10 minutes between three
Yes.
different meetings going on all the time. And I would have needed that. Like from the beginning, it was that, okay, the race is about 3.5 minutes, depending on how long the race is.
Yeah.
There's my instant gratification. Putting on a bet for a 90-minute match that might not start until, I don't know, 4 hours time
Yeah. I get you.
wouldn't have interested me. But
Yeah.
I think that is interesting for you. Like, I mean, for me, I started off with those 10-minute between the breaks. Then it had to be dog races that there was about 6 minutes between, and then you're
Yeah.
you're doing all the other stuff in between. So I mean, did you progress to anything like that? Did it go online or any fixed
No,
odds?
oh well, yeah, it definitely went online, but I always stuck to football. I suppose my gambling at the start would have been very much in like the shops. It would have been Boyle Sports or Paddy Power and stuff like that. And I used to kind of plan, we'll say, as people say, I'd plan my bets. So, like, when I'd wake up in the morning, I would look at what games, and then I'd be like, right, I know enough about this team and so on, like that. So, while I wasn't getting the betting, let's say the adrenaline rush of the bet being on, I was still spending my whole day planning the bet. So it was kind of feeding that side of it. Once as I think it was around 2015 that I found Bet365. And just to go back to what Barry said, that's where they really started investing in different markets. So it wasn't just win, draw, loss. It was yellow cards, corners, goal in the first 10 minutes. It was literally you if you needed that 3 minute buzz, you could pick a market to get that, you know what I mean? So yeah, I kind of found that even the planning of the bet was enough to keep me interested and happy for the day, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So I know I could put on a bet at 5 p.m. and the game might not be till 8, but then the rest of the day is waiting till 8 o'clock, and I'd cancel plans. I do everything to make sure I can watch that 90 minutes then.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, no, and I get that. And that's probably, along the lines of what it should be for a healthy person
Yeah.
who can control that. I would have done the same though. I mean, like I would have got up, I would have got the paper in the morning. The
Yes.
races wouldn't have started till 12 or 2, depending on what time of the year it was. I would have planned my bets, I would have done all my
Yeah.
research, and I would have put on those bets. But then if the first one lost,
You're
I
back
went
down
out of
again. Yeah.
control. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It was everything that was on the screens. So like if your bet that you put on for the football wasn't looking like it was going your way, were those markets in between, would you be putting on bets during the match?
Oh yeah. So like the last 4 or 5 years, I kind of fully focused on corners, which it's a bit of a random one, but I suppose I picked corners because I'd always go for the over first of all. So like it would be over 8.5 or 9.5 corners. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was obviously because no matter if the bet hadn't won quick enough, the bet is still live till the last kick of the game, more or less, you know what I mean? So I still get that. But if there was a game and let's say I picked over 8.5 and there was like three corners with 75 minutes, I would straight away then be going, okay, race to five corners. Who's the team going to get to five quickest? And I would back that. What I also found is if I did, let's say I did pick over 8.5 and very quickly there was over 8.5, the bookies would then pay that money out quick. So it would be in my account within 10 minutes. I would then be like, oh, okay, so there's loads of corners so far. There's now going to be over 15, and I would straight away take that money and put it straight back on again. And I think it was the constant, like, you're never happy with. If I could walk away with that, then in my eyes, yeah, that's a successful day, but I could never do that. It would be the next game or the next bet or the next, who's close to getting seven corners. It was constantly looking for the next market.
Yeah, and Bet365, because I remember my account with them as with many other operators, but they were kind of one of the earlier ones to bring in that, bet cash out type
Yeah.
of thing. So if your bet looks like it's going to win, you can cash out for a certain
Yes.
amount, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. They had very attractive graphics, I suppose, and markets, and just something about the way they designed that was really enticing, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah. Yeah. I found that app, and I could never explain it to people, but like, I'd hear of people saying, "Oh, I use different accounts because, I might not get the market in this." For me, it was Bet365, and it was. I get what you mean by the way they designed the website and stuff. It just draws you in, and like even the graphics for the matches when the matches were being played, you could actually see the ball would go forward to, let's say I was waiting on a team to get a corner, would go forward. They'd cancel the market. So straight away my heart would be like, oh, it's a corner. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And then you're waiting to see, does the corner mark, like, does it go from there's been 6 to 7 corners? And whatever way they designed it, it's very yeah, it definitely keeps you hooked on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Tony O'Reilly's spoken about that. And Tony famously did all of his gambling on the Paddy Power
Yes,
app
yeah.
account, right? So all of his gambling was a Paddy Power uh, for online, which was most of his gambling. But he kept an eye on the scores, on the markets, what was happening on Bet365.
I found them to be so reactive
Yeah,
to the game itself. You know, like I could be watching a game on the TV, and again, I was fully focused on corners. So like I would have the corner market open, and before you'd see a corner on the TV, the market is closed. So that, you know, you're fairly certain there's going to be a corner. And it was just every time you see that market close, it's like you're getting that buzz 15, 20 times in the game, you know what I mean? Because you're like, oh, here we go. Um, so yeah, Bet365 is crazy. Yeah, it was the one that really caught me. I never really liked any of the other ones. It's where I did 99% of my gambling. Really was Bet365.
yeah. And a few people have said that to me over the years that there's something they find about the look of Bet365 and the way all the information is updated. And I think Tony used to say that. Now, Tony, that's not how he was doing it, would be driving with his laptop. Like, this is it. This is long before anybody else had mobile broadband. I don't know how the hell.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah,
4G, long before 4G, probably long before 3G, right?
yeah,
And somehow he was managing to get a signal while driving around and having his laptop. And he would, like, I think the screen kind of grayed out for a second when there was some update in
Yes,
one of the
it
markets.
would just
Yeah.
it would come up market suspended, and all the odds would blank out, so it would just go grey, and you're like, okay, this is either good or bad. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Yeah, and the psychology of that, somebody very, very well paid who knows a lot about human psychology came, came up with that one. Yeah.
yeah.
But doesn't isn't the CEO of Bet365 like one of the best paid women in the world? Like she
He,
something like
she's the
three or
rich.
400 million a year.
Yeah, she's the richest woman in the UK. Yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
Yeah. Why is that? Why is that? Because of all the people who are winning money from that
It-
365? I
yeah,
don't think so.
when you try explain that to people, sometimes they don't seem to. It takes a while for them to grasp that. Yeah, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and look, everybody thinks they're the exception to the rule. Like, most
Yeah,
people understand 99.9% of people who gamble regularly are losing. If you look at your
yeah,
annual profit and loss, which you can do online, you're going to be in the red at the end of the year.
yes,
99,
yes,
over 99% of people. But
yeah.
then everybody assumes, well, I'm in the 1%.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I think a lot of it is the last win they had kind of helps them to forget what they've lost the week before, because that's kind of what happened with me. Like I deep down I knew I was losing money, but part of me was like, but I won last week, because people will say to me, "Oh, you couldn't have been sorry there." No, people were saying, "Oh, you couldn't have been that bad at betting." Like, no, I wasn't. Like, I had winning bets. It wasn't like every bet lost. It was just the amount of betting that you do, you're going to lose. You know what I mean? It's completely against you. So I think that's it's funny how the brain works and convinces you that, oh, I'll forget about all the losses because I had a 50 or win last night. It's a bit mental.
yeah, and that is a big part of it. Yeah, to anybody who's read Tony O'Reilly's book as well, like, I think he stole 1.75 million. Obviously, he would have staked a lot of his own money as well. So let's say 2 million that he staked.
Yeah.
But there was 10.5 million went through the account. So that is 8.5 million in wins, which is more than
Yeah.
your stake, right? So on
Yeah.
paper, that looks like you're a good gambler, right? Which, in terms of picking winners, for sure, Tony
Yeah.
was. But that isn't the problem. The problem is, what do you then do with your winnings? If you
It's
restake them,
yeah.
you're in
You're putting
trouble.
it you're just putting it straight back in, do you know what I mean? And like, even if you have a winning month, it's just you're gonna lose it eventually, do you know what I mean? You just can't. It's the not being able to withdraw the money and leave it out of the account that's the problem. Like, people think, oh, you're a terrible gambler and blah blah blah. Yeah, fine, you can call me whatever you want, like, but it's kind of it's the amount of betting. That's the problem, you know what I mean? Or that was my problem anyway.
And look, it's very, very similar story for everybody.
Yeah.
some of the details are different for sure. Everybody's an individual, but like you zoom out a little bit, and everybody's story starts to look
Yeah, yeah. It's
very similar. You know, there's a
it,
lot of
it's
parallels
it's very
there.
it's very much the same. It's just normally the figures and some of the behaviors and stuff slightly changed, but it is literally. I suppose when I found Tony, I when I first started counselling, I went to it was like a government funded place, but they dealt mainly with alcohol and drugs, which I've never had an issue with. So I actually felt a bit lost there, and I didn't feel like they were like, not to knock them or anything, but I didn't think they were equipped to help me, to be honest. And it was just kind of through my own research that I found extern gambling. I was doing a bit of research and you came up. I think it might have been yourself I spoke to very first. I think it might have been anyway. It wasn't Tony. And when I finally got hold of Tony and had a chat with him, I came off the phone and I just goes, he's my guy. He's me. He's literally me, but he's just his figures are different, but he is me. So it was kind of, yeah, we're all kind of the same, really.
Yeah, and that's true. Like the number we say it probably every week on the podcast, but like the number of zeros really don't matter. Like it's the impact that it's having on your
Yeah,
life that is the important part. I
yeah.
mean, like at what point did you realize or start thinking that maybe you had a problem in terms of the gambling?
I knew fairly early. I knew kind of by 19, I was already losing friends and I was borrowing money and then dodging people and stuff like that. Like I knew I had a problem very early, but it wasn't something I was ready to. I kind of you'd convince yourself that look, I can do this right. It's just get the right system in place. But I knew very early that I had a problem. Like I within 6 months, I was borrowing money from school friends. And kind of then I was dodging them because I couldn't pay them back. And even if I did pay them back, I'd borrow it again. And then they started talking about me. You'd hear kind of whispers, and you kind of realize, oh, do you know what? I've kind of burned my bridges there and stuff. So very early, I knew I had a problem, but I just wasn't. I didn't want to stop at that stage.
Yeah. And how did things end up? I mean, I know some of your stories in the public domain, but like I'll leave it up to you how much of that you want to
No,
talk about
no,
today.
no, you're fine. I suppose my twenties were very much kind of a haze. Like I know what happened in my twenties. I know my life and stuff like that. But when people ask me dates and things like that, it's very blended, if that makes sense. I struggle to kind of say, okay, that was 2017, 18, 19, blah, blah, blah. But basically, I spent my whole 20s gambling and kind of going from one crisis to the next, one relationship to the next, different friend groups and so on like that, different jobs. And eventually, it kind of, I suppose I started a rescue called Cat Haven in 2017. I didn't know what I was starting. I've always liked animals, and I kind of just started taking in animals, and I set up a Facebook page, and it kind of took off. I was just rehoming them, making sure they got good homes. And then I was told that I had to apply for charity status because people started giving money, which I did. I followed the process and so on like that. But as it's quite in the public domain, I started to use that money for gambling as well. And eventually that all came to a head. Like it was always going to come to a head. It was just I was kind of fighting fires all along, trying to push it back, push it back. But eventually in 2019, that came to it was found out that I'd actually stolen money and used it for gambling. So it kind of the twenties were very much. I don't know, am I allowed curse on this, but they
Curse
were.
away.
It was very much a blended shit show, is kind of how I put it. Uh, I don't like, I can't distinguish between my, let's say, 21st year and 24th year. I know what happened in those years, but it was a constant cycle of wake up in the morning, make sure I have money for a bet. If I win the bet, fantastic, I'm on top of the world. If I lose the bet, who can I get money off next? And that kind of went on for literally until I was nearly 30 years of age.
You very accurately described my entire 20s.
Yeah, it's scary. I can't put dates and things. I can't. I it's just I know it happened, but it's blended. If that makes sense, it's hard
No,
to
it
tell.
does. It makes total sense to me, and it's actually I kind of like the way you've put that because if someone asked me the same thing, I couldn't tell them. Like it's all a blur nearly.
Yeah,
It's like you were there, but you weren't there. You
yeah,
remember things happening, but you don't actually remember emotional connection in any way to them because your brain was somewhere else. It's actually a very good way of putting it because I completely relate to that. And I was 30, yeah, 30 getting into my
yeah,
recovery. So it was my entire 20s because for me it started at the age of 21.
yeah,
Um and it's there's such a sadness with that, I think, as well, because that's
yeah,
an entire decade of your life that just doesn't, it's like it didn't exist, even though
yeah,
so many things happened during it.
yeah. Like you were there in your 20s, but you weren't. You know, yeah, that's kind of one of the people go on about. Oh, how did you get over the money and stuff? Like, eventually, you just get to the point where, like, all right, that's the money is fine. Like, you can go away and earn more money, if put your head down and go to work, but you can't get your 20s back. There's no way to turn that back. So yeah, that will be the worst part.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it's the loss of now. Okay, look, I'm not going to minimize the financial devastation that a lot of people
Yeah,
experience. That
yeah,
is a big deal and it's important and it can have a devastating impact. But on top of that, there's that loss of time. And like I was only thinking about it coming in the drive to work this morning. Like my similarly, but for different reasons with substances, my 20s were just a fucking
yeah,
a blur, and it was wash, rinse, repeat, and it was the same old shit. And it was only in my early 30s when I started having children that I started going, oh, hang on, Barry, you can cop yourself
yeah,
on here a little bit. I did
yeah,
my counselling degree, started my counselling degree age 35 and qualified age 39. So like there's that lost time. Now I had some good times in there. It wasn't all bad
yeah,
times. There
yeah,
is that element of it was the same cycle of things over and over and over again, and that becomes naturally a bit of a blur because it's like
yeah,
it's just so much repetition, which is the nature of any addiction or habit. But also that thing of, well, hang on, I'm 10 years behind all my peers who I was
yeah,
in secondary school with them. I did my leaving cert with them. They have jobs, they've got a mortgage, they're having kids, have a qualification in something, and they're earning decent money. And I'm like, it's like I just left secondary school and I'm
yeah,
30 and I'm starting doing crap jobs and crap money, no qualification.
yeah,
And it's like that thing, and that comes up with clients frequently. They look around at their peers and go, oh, I'm just that feeling of being miles behind where
yeah.
you would want to be, or where your peers are. That's a horrible thing. I don't think it's talked about enough. The loss of time and the loss of
Growing it.
progression. Yeah, hitting
It's
small.
yeah, it's the progression. It's kind of you're kind of stuck in standstill. You know what I mean? It's kind of yeah. It was kind of when I stopped. I kind of looked around and so obviously sorry now I'm gonna sorry there now someone's ringing me there. Um oh there you go, you're back. Sorry. Um like when I stopped, I kind of looked around and I didn't speak to any of my school friends, but it still had Facebook, so I could, pop on and have a look. And I was kind of seeing people, as you said, they're getting married, they're having kids, they have their own house, and they seem to be doing well. You never know what's going on behind doors, but it was kind of you'd look at it and you're like, oh man, what was I doing? It's like fuck, I'm getting old. It's yeah, it's the time. That's the even now, like it's the one thing that would still come back every once in a while, and you're like, ah, what did I do? Like,
Yeah,
I think there's a few ways to look at that though, right? And I could say this from a possibly person who's justifying not justifying her past, but um I can't change my past,
yeah,
unfortunately. And there's a lot I wish I could change. But saying that, I know that if I hadn't gone through this, and we can call it a traumatic experience because it is, a traumatic experience. I know that if I hadn't gone through everything I've gone through, I would not have the awareness or maturity that I do now. Like, honestly, I look, I've been saying this a lot to myself lately, but I feel like you possibly don't become a fully fledged human being until you're at least 35 to 40. You have to have actually lived through something to be a person.
Yeah.
Like, there are some people I look at and I know that they have done everything right. You know what I mean? For their entire lives, they've done everything right. And at the same time, I'm looking at them and they're all stressed and I'm going, I've probably already gone through what they're going to go through at a later stage in their lives. So that brings me some weird comfort that I've kind of, okay, I've done this. And now I can hopefully move forward with a bit more sense.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, you do get a lot of the let's call them mistakes or regrets out of the way earlier, hopefully for
Yeah.
people who stay in recovery. And you learn a lot. We had a great, because we've gone back a few years now, a great guest on, a woman from Finland, from a gambling addiction organization over there, Jena, and she had a severe slot machine gambling addiction, and she racked. I don't like talking about numbers, but she racked up a substantial amount of debt and got into all sorts of trouble. But her way of kind of getting that straight in her own head was to say, "Well, that was my student loan. Like that was the cost of me learning this very valuable life lesson that I have no business gambling ever on anything." Full stop. End of
Yeah.
story. And it took me a lot of years, and it took me a lot of money and a lot of pain and suffering, not just for her as an individual, but for people around her, to learn that valuable life lesson. But she learned it, and now she's turned her life around. She's helping other
Yeah.
women. Like trying to get that stuff straight in your head, whether it's about, sometimes people have lost astronomical amounts of money and they're going, oh, I could have bought a house, or I could have bought this, or I could have done that, or it's the time, or it's the combination of both, and dwelling on the regrets. That's not really healthy or helpful. It's normal. We all
Yeah.
do it, is normal, but like many normal things, it's not always healthy or helpful. But just going back to your own story for a second, Owen, I mean, so you started taking money from the charity that you set up. You're not the first person to do that, and I doubt very much that you'd be the last person to do it. But when that all came to a head, like, was there criminal proceedings? Did you have to go to court?
Yeah. So it was actually, it came to a head kind of in an unusual route. It went straight to RT Investigate, so that was how I first found out about it as well. So it went to the national news reporter. They found out about it first, and they contacted myself. I knew it was coming, in terms of, I knew it was coming to the kind of the end of my gambling before things were going to blow up. Like I had, I kind of exhausted every avenue that I could. Things were kind of getting really, I was literally dodging things every day. So I got a phone call from a reporter, and basically they said that they had found the bank statements that showed that I was gambling. And very quickly after that, I was contacted by the Gardaí, the economics division, or I think that's what they're called. And yeah, progressed fairly quick from there. It was, I went in voluntarily, like myself. I was never arrested or anything like that. But I just had my hands up straight away. I I was told afterwards by my solicitor that I was very stupid, but I admitted everything on the phone to the news reporter the same night he rang me. So yeah, it went through court. It actually all came to a head just as COVID had kind of decided to invade Ireland. So it was a slow process at the same time. Normally they like to, get you in through court quick and stuff like that, but it went on for a good few years, which was a positive for me because it gave me time to make my money back. Like I had to work my ass off, and repay all the money that I stole. So it gave me that time. And by the time the final court came around, then I had everything repaid. So it was a positive, but it went on for a long time where I was thinking, am I going to prison? Or, every time I went into court, I was told to pack a bag. Yeah, it was a little bit of mental torture on top of actually having to try stop gambling as well and deal with the other issues as to why I was gambling. So like with Tony, it wasn't just the gambling side that we kind of looked at. We kind of looked at everything in terms of my life and so on like that. So yeah, I went on so it was 2019, the end of 2019, and my final court date was February 2022. So yeah, it was a bit dragged out, all right, but it worked out okay in the end. I repaid the money and I got a suspended sentence for it. So, yeah, thankfully that's all kind of behind me now.
Yeah, and that's great because I know, like before starting then this project 9 years ago, I was involved with an ex-prisoners project in Waterford for about 5 years in different capacities, and like a lot of the people who use that service who'd been through the prison system, sometimes they've been in prison multiple times. They could have
Yeah,
picked up dozens of charges, or in some cases, hundreds of charges, and been to court many, many, many times in
yeah,
many cases. But even for the people who'd been to court hundreds of times or 100 times, the stress of an upcoming court case was just head melting, and that thing of going, well, I could go in here and I could be going away in the dog box in the
yeah,
prison van later today and going to whichever prison they decide to send you to and whatever happens there and all of that stuff. It's a head melter, even for people
yeah.
who've experienced it before, and for first timers, I'd imagine it's more so. So I suppose you had the advantage that Tony had been through all of that
Yeah.
process as well.
Yeah, no, talking to Tony was I used to actually ring him every day before. So I would have my court appearance and I'd ring him the day before because I don't know why, but my solicitor who he was a very good solicitor, but he was nice. But he used to ring me every day the day before court and tell me pack a bag. And remember, I was trying to pay back money, so I was literally working every hour I could. Um, and I'd be at work the day before court, like, and I'd be trying to keep my head straight, and then he'd ring me and say, "Oh, are you ready for tomorrow? Make sure you pack your bag." And I would absolutely freak out at work. I would absolutely freak out. So Tony was the guy I rang every single day before court. And he was able to calm me down and explain how it works, and it was really like I'm not going to say I'm glad Tony went through it, but I'm glad that he was there and had been through it, that he could talk me, kind of explain the process and stuff because nobody else would. Like yeah, it was it was scary. I'm not going to lie. Yeah,
There,
There's a
there, were you
big
going to come in there? Sorry.
demonstration. Yeah, it's a big kind of showing of how important that peer support was for you,
yeah,
and it's a big element of this, and especially it was two elements for you. It was the potential prison sentence and it was the addiction itself. So I think that I I make no secret of Tony being helping me through my addiction as well, and how much that peer support meant to me at the time, and that was during COVID as well.
yeah,
So it was a phone call, but
yes, yeah,
it
yeah,
was a phone call I waited for every week.
yeah.
Where, how did TikTok come about? What made you decide to do that?
Oh, um, in a funny way, it was kind of. So basically, when I took the money, I wasn't only accused by certain people of taking money, but I was accused of being cruel to animals, and they kind of made up stories that were like totally off the wall, like and it was more kind of I wanted to. My platform before used to be Cat Haven, which was the rescue, and I had people who used to follow the rescue religiously and stuff like that. And when everything came out, I had to close that straight away. I was informed I had to no more. That's it. Cat Haven Facebook page is closed, and it was kind of my way to try reach the people that obviously I'd hurt and that had given a lot of their time. It was my way to try reach them in a way of to say, look. this is actually what happened. This is, I know people said I'm the devil and I'm everything under the sun, but this was the reason. This is what actually happened. It was more kind of, basically, I was told to shut up by my solicitor, and like, no matter what story was put out there, I wasn't allowed to respond to it or anything like that. So it was kind of, it started as me trying to just say, look, I held my hands up and I fucked up big time, like, but this is what actually happened. And very quickly then, like very quickly, I started getting messages from people who were struggling as well. And it kind of just grew from there, really. And people started me, like, could you make a video on this? Could you make a video on that? And it kind of just progressed to it. And it, in a way, it kind of helped me because I used to do lives as well. I don't really have as much time anymore to do that. But if I had a really crap day, like I could just go on and I could just talk about anything to a TV screen. Like it was literally my phone screen. They could see me, but I couldn't see who was looking at the other end or anything. So I could just go on and rant and kind of say, yeah, today's a shit one. And it kind of helped me that way, So it was, at the start, it was more just to, I was tired of being quiet, to be honest with you.
Yeah, like pylons like that can happen when somebody's down and you see it online all the time. It's like, oh, this person's down. Let's let's all pile in on top of them. And
Yeah,
on top of the things that they actually did or allegedly did, let's add some tails and legs
yeah,
and other
yeah,
parts to it and really go to town on this person. And then yeah, it can be difficult to cut through that noise and be able to stand up for yourself and give your
yeah.
side of the story as well. So, and it's important to do that. I mean, you put your hands up for the things that you did, which is admirable. But I don't think you should be taking on stuff that you never did.
No, like I used to, so every time I went to court, there'd be a report, and there were certain people would make sure that it was shared on Facebook, and then I would literally spend a week like reading through the comments and like reading them again and again and again, and I'm like, oh man, it's like that's so far from the truth, but I couldn't say anything. And I suppose I didn't want to draw people on me either, like, but I don't know if you've ever had stuff written about you that's not true. It kind of eats away at you, to be honest, So it was just, I just wanted to, look. People didn't realize that I'd taken the money for gambling at the start. That was never actually made public for a long time. They thought that I was off on holidays and fucking, you know what I mean, not paying the pet bills and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was just kind of, I suppose, say sorry as well as say, look, this is the truth, and I've held my hands up to what I did. But I don't really feel that I should have to be blamed for things that I didn't do, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I don't think you should have had to justify things you didn't have to do anyway, but I can understand that it must have been very hard to be in that headspace, see those type of comments and not respond. I think if it was me in that situation at the time, I probably would have wanted to respond as well. Now I could not care less.
Yeah,
But
I
that has
agree.
taken growth.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you now. Now, if like every once in a while, like RT decided to bring out a program there at the start of the year where they were actually investigating like big multi-million euro frauds and stuff like that. And then at the end, they decided to stick my story in, which was a done story. Like it was 2019, everything's repaid, everything's done. Nobody talks about it anymore, and they just decided to stick my story in at the end. Like, and again, it just dragged everything back up again on Facebook and stuff. And this time, to be honest, it was more just, I wasn't laughing at the fact I did it, but it was just I could actually smile at the comments of, oh, he did this and he did that and he did, it was kind of like, look, think what you want at this stage. I don't really. I think I've spoken enough about it and been upfront through my TikTok, through podcasts that I've done. That look, I'll hold my hands up to everything I did. If you want to chat absolute rubbish about me after that, then fine. It's up to yourself. I won't really lose sleep over it anymore. Like so, yeah, it is growth.
Yeah, but it's important to point that out because at the very start, and like we have people come to us all the time, they're in that, chaotic headspace. And a lot of the time, what I notice anyway is just that what will people think, what people say, this
Yeah,
kind of thing. I mean, everyone feels that way at the start, don't they? But I think it's important to know that that will change. Like, I
Yeah,
think, well, what mightn't change for everyone. But you will learn coping skills, and you will learn, actually it doesn't matter what people think, because
yeah,
I always say to people, when you're on your deathbed, are you going to look back and think, well, what did my neighbor think of me, or how I live my life?
yeah, yeah,
So it does take growth, but I think, it's great to see that there is that growth there.
yeah.
But that was your original reason. What is it today? Because you've gained a lot of followers.
I think today it's kind of, I feel like a part of it is I kind of feel like I'm accountable to the people who follow me, if that makes sense. Like it I felt if I ever felt like relapsing, it's not just, I feel like I'd be leaving them. It sounds cheesy now, but it feels like I'd be kind of letting them down as well, because a lot of people come to me for help. I'm not a counselor, and I make that clear to everyone. Like I seek professional help. I've Tony's website actually tagged on the top of my TikTok page. But it's, a lot of people don't want to talk to counselors, or they don't want to make it very official. They just want to have a chat. Um, yeah, I enjoy it. I'm not gonna lie. I enjoy the kind of, every once in a while you get a message from someone and they'll say, I haven't gambled in a year and your videos have helped that. And that's kind of a, I don't know, is it kind of just feeding my ego as well at the same time? But it's nice to know that, someone else has gone through it and they've come out the other side and they're doing well and stuff like that. So it's kind of just that, really.
Yeah, well, that accountability piece is great, and it is good to have that. I mean, like Tony often talks about, the fact that he could not walk into a betting shop on
No,
the world. That's just
no.
not happening. Now he could gamble online till the cows come home, because who the hell's
Yeah, yeah. Well, even,
but having your
even,
story out there
yeah,
means that you are accountable to people.
to be honest, even for me now, I like, some of my friends will gamble. I work in construction, so I'm sure you deal with it a lot. Gambling is fairly rampant in construction. So like, I'm dealing with lads sitting next to me in the van gambling away. It's fine. But like, I so for myself, it was football betting was my problem. So we were actually working way up the country, and the lads decided to go into the casino. It was a local casino that had just opened. So they asked me to go down with them. I walked down with them. I just walked around the room and I walked back out again. That was it. I never had issues with like roulette, anything like that. Never interested in the slightest. I got a message on my Facebook page, or on my TikTok page. Sorry. Someone asked me, was I okay, because they had seen me inside the casino. And
So,
ever since then, I am so freaked out about even standing outside a bookie shop, in case someone thinks, you know what I mean? It's like, because my story is so out there, and like, they might know me, or you know what I mean, and I can't walk into a bookies because someone will say I'm gambling, or I can't go online because when I send in my passport they might see my name and they might relate. Do you know what I mean? It's good in that way as well. Like, so yeah, I'd be afraid that like, it is the accountability side of it. Like, people could, I feel like I'm leaving them down, to be honest. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I don't know. I feel like the fact that I've gone so long kind of shows them and helps them realize that they can do it. And then if you do relapse after so long, which can happen, don't, like, Jesus, I'm not delusional either. Like, but it's just nice to know that they can see my side of it and see that, we do get better. Like, that's kind of it.
one last question before we leave you go for today, and thanks a million again for joining us today. On it's great chatting to you, getting your insights on things. But as somebody who's been in recovery for a while, like, what would you say to anybody out there who's kind of starting out day one? Like, what's the most important thing for you?
For me, it's actually the question I get asked the most, is like, what's the first step? And it's, again, it sounds cheesy and it sounds cliche, but it's just ask for help, talk to the people around you. It was the scariest, by far the scariest part of. I was facing prison, I was facing the guards, I was facing everything, but having to face the people around me and tell them what I'd done, the extent of what I'd done and stuff, it was so scary. Like, I nearly packed my bags and moved to England without telling anyone. I was just ready to go. But when I actually told my partner at the time, it was shitty for her. Excuse my language, right? But it was. Do you know if you were carrying like a 20 kg weight for 20 years and then you get to put it down? That was, and I remember looking at her face and I don't think she understood the extent of it because she never gambled herself or anything like that. But I just felt, this sounds selfish, but I felt so good, telling her. I felt like, okay, right, I've done the worst part. Now it's just, I just deal with the shitty stuff like the guards and stuff like that. But I've actually told someone. So that was like, yeah, tell someone that you're struggling. I know they're like, people always say, oh, they're going to be angry. I mean, they're going to be disappointed. They might be like, but it's, you're not going to, I don't think I would have ever stopped if I didn't tell anyone. That's my, so talk to the people around you.
Yeah, and it's that accountability piece again. And it is that almost everybody says the same thing. It's the relief that you feel when,
Yeah,
and sometimes it's even when people get caught, like they're not voluntarily
yeah,
telling them,
yeah.
but when they get caught and it's like, okay, thank God.
Yeah,
That
you don't,
happened. It's there's a lot of unpleasant stuff that comes after.
yeah, but you don't have to put on that mask
Yeah,
anymore in the morning. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of, it's nice, it's scary, but it's definitely the first step. Yeah,
we better leave you go there, Owen. Thanks so much, and thanks for
perfect.
like all the cool stuff you're doing on TikTok as well. And like
No
you
problem.
definitely
Thanks for
are
having me.
helping a lot of people, and I'm sure many of the people that you help, you never hear from them, but you are helping people out there for sure. It's the Recovering Gambler over on TikTok. That's where people will find you for the most part, is it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks a million. Claire, any last thoughts or words before we hit the road?
No, just thank you so much, Owen. I feel like we've got a lot in common from our histories. But you know what? We're one of many. So it's always really helpful to have these stories told. And thank you for being so honest and open. And it was lovely meeting you in
Lovely meeting you too.
by
Thanks
face.
very much. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Owen. And that's it today from the Problem Gambling Podcast. Take care, folks.